Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Nina Warhurst and Charlie State.
Our headlines today. Pressure grows to shut more schools. A teaching union demands a 2-week closure of all primaries and secondaries in England.
A new warning over hospitals. A senior doctor tells Breakfast that NHS staff across the UK should prepare for a spike in COVID admissions.
50 years since the Ibrox disaster in which 66 football fans were killed, Rangers and Celtic will come together to pay tribute to the victims.
1 year on from Australia's devastating wildfires, we hear how people's lives and the landscape are on the road to recovery.
Good morning. Manchester United close the gap and go level on points with the champions Liverpool at the top of the Premier League after beating Aston Villa last night.
Ready? Down and up. Down and up. Explode within 30 seconds.
And he got millions of us up and about during lockdown in 2020. But what's Joe Wicks got planned for 2021? We'll speak to him just before 9.
Good morning. Our cold spell of weather is going to continue for quite a while yet. Today, it's a frosty start with a risk of icy stretches this morning. It's a day of sunshine and showers, but those showers again will be wintry at times with further snowfall, particularly in northern Scotland. I'll have more a bit later on.
It's Saturday, the 2nd of January. Good morning. Our top story. The country's largest teaching union is calling for all schools in England to close for 2 weeks after the government ordered all primaries in London to remain shut when the new term begins.
Pupils in some boroughs in the capital were due to return on Monday. Government says the city-wide closures were a last resort due to rising coronavirus infections. Here's our education correspondent, Dan Johnson.
Keeping children in school has always been the priority, with closures and more home learning a last resort. But the government was forced to make that move, announcing on Wednesday that primary schools in most parts of London and some other areas in the southeast couldn't have pupils back next week because of increasing case numbers. The London boroughs not included challenged that patchwork approach, questioning the criteria and pointing out some children cross boroughs to go to school. Last night, the Education Secretary announced a change, which means all London's primary schools will now stay closed.
The absolute right place for all children to be is in school, but we need to really focus on making schools safe and ensuring that we get a clear strategy now in place to support our most disadvantaged children, who we're extremely worried about that attainment gap, which is growing massively for them as this pandemic continues to rage.
It's not the first decision the Department for Education has had to reverse, but ministers say they're responding to fast-moving situations and changing local conditions. They stress the priority's always been to keep schools open where possible. But now, more than 1 million primary school children face at least a fortnight learning from home. That means frustration for many parents and some teachers too.
It is completely unacceptable that we keep having these U-turns, these last-minute decisions, where parents don't know where they are, where teachers and school staff just don't know where they are. And the other thing I would have to say is we don't see this happening in Wales or Northern Ireland or Scotland. We don't see these U-turns, these the furious reversals in policy, and that makes for a much calmer environment for both parents and education professionals.
The changes announced earlier this week in England mean secondary school pupils taking exams will go back on the 11th of January. All others will learn remotely until at least the 18th. Most primary schools will still open as normal on Monday, apart from those in the virus hotspots of London and the South East. They'll stay closed to all but children of key workers and vulnerable families. In Northern Ireland, the return will be delayed by a week or more. Online learning's planned for pupils in Wales until the 11th of January, and in Scotland, classrooms won't fill up until at least the middle of the month. Officials can't rule out more schools being disrupted or these closures going beyond a fortnight. Some are already calling for other schools to be included, but the government says it will do all it can to keep children in the classroom. Dan Johnson, BBC News.
A number of hospitals are now facing a worse situation than at the peak of the first wave of the pandemic last year. That's according to the president of the Royal College of Physicians.
Professor Andrew Goddard says NHS staff are braced for a difficult few months as a result of the new variant of the virus. Our health reporter Jim Reid has more.
The pressure on hospitals in parts of the country shows no sign of easing off. Staff are tired. Some wards are at the limit of their capacity.
All hospitals that haven't had the big pressures that they've had in the southeast and London and South Wales should expect that it's going to come their way. This new variant is definitely more infectious and is spreading across the whole of the country. It seems very likely that we're going to see more and more cases wherever people work in the UK, and we need to be prepared for that.
Another 53,285 virus cases were recorded across the UK yesterday. 616 people lost their lives to the virus. In London, the Nightingale Hospital is now being readied for action. It's thought it will soon start to take non-COVID patients or those recovering from the disease. Vaccinations are seen as the way out of this crisis. 1 million doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech jab have been delivered, but GPs are being asked to postpone a second booster shot, giving it after 3 months rather than 3 weeks to roll it out more quickly. Senior doctors say 1 dose is still effective, but for some, any delay to that booster is concerning. Darren, a pharmacy technician, suffers from a serious breathing condition and had his first vaccine dose on Boxing Day.
It'd be devastating, another 3 months, when you're so close and you think, oh, you know, life. And if that's put off another 3 months, it's a huge impact. Huge.
The government says tens of millions of doses of at least 2 COVID vaccines will be available by the spring. Getting those to the people who need them most will be crucial as the NHS fights the winter wave of this pandemic. Jim Reid, BBC News.
Today marks the 50th anniversary of the Ibrox disaster when 66 people were crushed to death, leaving a football match between Rangers and Celtic in Glasgow.
It was one of Scotland's worst peacetime tragedies, as Andrew Pickin reports.
1971 was only 2 days old when Rangers met Celtic at Ibrox. The game was dull and many fans started leaving before late goals for either side during the last 5 minutes. The day became infamous for the deadly crush which developed on a stairway at the Rangers end of the stadium. Among the victims were 5 teenagers from Markinch and Fife who never came home.
We were all together, just joking, having a wee bit of banter. There was no animosity because they were Rangers supporters, we were Celtic supporters. There was nothing like that. We were pals.
Celtic fans Peter Lee and Shane Fenton were among those who left early that day.
It wasn't until we got back to Kincardine where the supporters buses used to stop on the way back. The older boys would go in for the pub for a pint or whatever. It was when they came back out the pub onto the bus, they were telling us they'd seen on the television there'd been an incident at Ibrox, there had been fatalities at the Rangers end of the ground. And that was the first of us knowing about anything happening at all.
The boys were among the 66 dead and 145 injured. 50 years on, modern crowd science has given us a better understanding of what went wrong.
In a crowd that's packed to the levels of density that eyewitnesses were commenting on at Ibrox and on a slope, then you get the gravitational force added to the fall. And as each person falls onto others, then you get a cascade dynamic.
In the wake of the disaster, Rangers rebuilt the stadium, making it one of the safest in Europe. Across Scotland on January 2nd, people will mark the 50th anniversary of the Ibrox disaster. Andrew Pickin, BBC News.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.